Hello, listeners. It's a pleasure to see everyone on the channel today. Let's go through a story of everyday life, but full of emotions and profound lessons about humanity. If you love stories like this, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any upcoming stories. And now, let's listen to today's story. He was worth over $10 billion, a name that echoed in Forbes, Wall Street, and elite country clubs. But today, he sat on a cold sidewalk, unshaven, unwashed, invisible. Richard Sterling wasn't always like this, and he wouldn't stay like this either. Because this was all a test of humanity. Richard Sterling had it all: money, power, influence. But at 65, what he didn't have was peace or trust. His late wife had warned him, "Don't let the world harden you." But years of betrayal, from family, partners, even charities, had chipped away at his faith in people. So he made a decision. He shut down his calendar, canceled his flights, disappeared from the board, and reappeared as someone else. Homeless, forgotten, anonymous. Wearing old jeans, a tattered jacket, and shoes with holes in them, he stepped onto the streets of his own city, the very city where his name was on hospitals and skyscrapers. No limo, no assistant, no Rolex, just a small backpack, a hidden camera, and time. He gave himself 21 days, 3 weeks to live without his name, to walk the same sidewalks others slept on, to ask and watch who would help and who would turn away. It wasn't just curiosity, it was a man craving truth, and what he found would change everything. The first few days were the hardest, not because of hunger. Richard had prepared for that. Not because of sleep, though the concrete felt like ice against his back at night, but because of the looks, or rather, the lack of them. People didn't look at him. They looked past him. Businessmen in suits stepped around him like he was trash on the sidewalk. Women clutched their bags tighter when he coughed. Teenagers laughed when he asked if they had spare change. It was humbling, and quietly devastating. On day 3, he sat outside one of his own buildings, the Sterling Foundation headquarters, holding a cardboard sign. Not a single employee stopped. Not one. He recognized faces. People he had personally approved for raises. People who smiled in his boardroom. Now, they walked past him with earbuds in, eyes glued to phones, pretending he didn't exist. That night, he wrote in his notebook, "Money builds towers, but not bridges." He moved to a busier part of the city the next day, near the art district. Artists, students, baristas, tourists. Surely someone here would care. But again, the pattern repeated. A man gave him half a sandwich, then asked if he could take a photo with him to post online. A young woman dropped $1 into his cup, but never made eye contact. And the worst? A group of men in tailored coats mocked him loudly, accusing him of being lazy, high, a waste of taxpayer money. He sat in silence as they walked away. Not because he didn't have words, but because he was too stunned. He had funded shelters. He had donated to job training programs. He had once paid for an entire rehab center to be built. And now, this? That night, as he curled up under a loading dock, using his jacket as a blanket, tears filled his eyes. Not from pain, but from something deeper. Disillusionment. He thought he knew the world. He thought he understood people. But the truth? He had never truly seen them. Until now. It was day 7 when he found her. The morning had started like all the others. Cold, quiet, and full of footsteps that never stopped. He sat near a small 24-hour diner on the edge of downtown. It wasn't fancy. The kind of place where the floors squeaked and the coffee was always, a little burnt. But it was warm. And something about it felt less judgmental. He didn't ask for anything. Just sat, knees pulled to chest, sipping water from an old paper cup. Then he heard it. A soft voice. "Hey, are you hungry?" He looked up. She couldn't have been older than 25, wearing an apron with a ketchup stain, brown ponytail, tired eyes, kind smile. Before he could answer, she held out a paper bag. Leftover pancakes, still warm. He blinked, took it with shaking hands. "Why?" he asked. She shrugged. "Because I'd want someone to do the same for me. No camera, no selfie, no speech, just kindness." She sat next to him for a minute. Her break. Lit a cigarette. Offered him one. He declined. "What's your name?" she asked. He hesitated. "Rick." She smiled. "I'm Emily." They sat in silence. Not awkward. Just quiet. Like two humans sharing space in a loud, uncaring world. When her break ended, she stood. "If you're ever cold or just need a quiet spot, the back alley here's clean. I sweep it myself." Then she disappeared back inside. Richard stared at the bag of pancakes. Then, at the door, she vanished through. He didn't know why. But for the first time in a week, he didn't feel invisible. And that changed everything. Over the next few days, Richard returned to the diner. Always quiet. Always sitting just beyond the front window. Sometimes he'd get a nod from Emily. Sometimes a bag of leftovers. Sometimes nothing but a warm smile through the glass. And it was enough. He began to watch. Not just the streets, but her. Emily worked double shifts most days. Came in early. Left late. She never complained. Never snapped. Always polite. But there were signs. He noticed her shoes had holes in them. That her phone screen was cracked. That sometimes she skipped meals herself, giving the kitchen food away to others. One night, it rained hard. She slipped on the alley steps. He rushed over, instinctively, and helped her up. "You all right?" he asked. She winced, rubbing her arm. "Yeah, just clumsy." That was the first time she really looked at him. Not as a homeless man, but as a person. "You're not like the others," she said softly. He raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "You listen. Most people just stare or ask for things. But you're always watching, thinking." Richard didn't reply. He couldn't. Not yet. Later that evening, from his spot in the alley, he heard voices. Angry. Harsh. Emily's voice. And a man's. He peeked around the dumpster. A man, mid-30s, rough beard, flannel jacket, was arguing with her near the back door. "I told you I needed that money, Em." "I already paid the rent, Chris. I can't keep doing this." "You owe me." Richard's hands clenched. He wanted to step in, but she held up her hand. Firm. "Don't come back here again." The man spat on the ground and walked away. Emily stood still for a moment, then wiped her face, straightened her apron, and went back inside. The next morning, Richard asked, "Who was that?" She gave him a long look, then sat beside him, slowly. "My brother," she said quietly. "He's not well. But I try. I always try." She didn't cry, but her voice trembled. Richard listened, and for the first time in years, he felt something bloom in his chest. Respect, admiration, and something else. Hope. Richard couldn't sleep that night. Emily's words haunted him. "I try. I always try." So much strength in so few syllables. She didn't ask for pity. Didn't even ask for help. She just carried the weight of a broken family on her back, quietly, every day. He laid awake under a pile of cardboard boxes, heart heavier than the alley around him. By morning, He had made up his mind. He couldn't reveal who he was. Not yet. But he could do something. So he began to plan. That afternoon, while Emily worked her lunch shift, Richard limped to the nearby library. He used a public computer under the name Rick Samuels, an old alias from college. He opened a private browser and reconnected to his world. Within minutes, he was messaging his most trusted personal assistant, Andrea. She hadn't heard from him in over a week and nearly fainted when she saw his encrypted note. "I'm safe. I need a favor. Quietly. No questions. He instructed her to wire $2,000 in cash, hidden inside a hollowed-out book, to a P.O. box nearby. Then he made another request. He asked her to look into Emily. No invasive background check. Just the basics. Who she was, where she lived, and who this Chris really was. 3 days later, the package arrived. Richard opened the book in the back alley, pulled out the envelope, and stared at the neat bundle of cash. It wasn't much, at least not to him. But he knew it could buy groceries, pay bills, get her car fixed, and maybe breathe. That night, he left the envelope in a clean takeout bag with a note that simply read, "For when the world gets too heavy, thank you for seeing me." He waited across the street the next morning, watched as Emily stepped out for her break. She found the bag, looked around confused, then cautiously opened it. When she saw the cash, she froze. Her eyes welled up. She didn't scream, didn't panic. She just sat down on the back steps and cried. Not loud, not broken, just quietly. The kind of cry that comes from someone who finally feels noticed. A week passed, and Emily never mentioned the envelope, not once. But Richard noticed small things. Her shoes had been replaced. Her coat was newer. The tension in her shoulders, just a little lighter. Still, she never brought it up. Never asked who. Never questioned why. And somehow, that made him admire her more. But time was running out. His 21 days were nearly over, and he had one decision to make. Would he disappear again? Quietly? Or would he tell her the truth? He didn't want to be a savior. He didn't want thanks. But he also didn't want to vanish from her life without saying what needed to be said. It was a cold morning when everything changed. Emily came into work early. She looked pale, distracted. Richard watched from across the street, concerned. A few hours later, she stepped outside for her break. Her eyes scanned the alley and landed on him. She walked over, slowly. "Hey," she said. "Can I sit?" He nodded. She sat beside him on the step, hugged her knees. "My brother came by last night," she said. "He was high. Took my tips. Threatened the guy I'm dating." Richard's heart clenched. "I called the police," she added. "For the first time. And I think I finally let him go." She turned to him, her eyes raw. "And I don't know why I'm telling you this. Maybe because you actually listen." He swallowed hard. "Emily," he said, voice lower than usual. "There's something I haven't told you." She looked at him, curious but not afraid. He took a breath. "I'm not who I said I was. My name isn't Rick. It's Richard. Richard Sterling." She blinked. "The billionaire?" He nodded. Silence. Then, slowly, so slowly, she stood up. He expected anger, shock, disbelief. Instead, she knelt in front of him. "You're him," she said softly. "But you came here. You lived this." He nodded again. "Why?" He looked up at her, eyes glassy. "Because I needed to believe people like you still existed." Tears slipped down her cheeks. And finally, she smiled. "You didn't have to pretend," she whispered. "I know," he said. "But I'm glad I did." In the days that followed, everything changed. But not in the way Richard had once feared. Emily didn't run. She didn't act differently. If anything, she softened. She began asking questions, not about the money, but about him. Who he was. Why he did what he did. What he had learned. And Richard answered. Slowly. Honestly. They began to meet after her shifts. Sitting on the alley step with warm coffee, talking about loss, purpose, and what it meant to be seen. It wasn't romance. It was deeper. Connection. Respect. A kind of soul-level companionship neither had expected, but both had needed. One night, Richard asked her a question. If I gave you everything, not money, but a platform, what would you do with it? Emily blinked. Honestly? He nodded. I'd start a fund. For people like me. The in-betweens. Not quite poor enough to qualify. Not quite lucky enough to thrive. She paused. And I'd hire staff who actually know what struggle feels like. People who've been there. Richard smiled. I'd invest in that. A week later, Emily received an invitation, hand-delivered. You are cordially invited to the Sterling Foundation Annual Gala. She stared at it in disbelief. Richard appeared beside her, dressed in something much finer than his alley jacket. He looked himself, still soft in the eyes, but sharp in posture, composed, present. Come with me, he said, as my guest. She hesitated, then nodded. The night of the gala was surreal. Flashbulbs, gowns, velvet ropes. But Richard didn't walk the red carpet alone. He walked beside her. And when he took the stage that evening, he didn't talk about markets or mergers. He told a story about pancakes and silence and a girl who sat beside a stranger when no one else would. He ended with this. True wealth is not what you hold. It's who holds space for you when you feel like nothing. Tonight, I pass the torch not to a CEO, but to a soul. Emily Green. The reason I remember what it means to be human. Gasps. Then tears. Then applause. Emily stood frozen. And then she cried. Not from sadness, but from finally being seen. Outside the gala, reporters swarmed. But Richard shielded her. This part, he whispered. You don't owe anyone. She nodded. From waitress to witness to something more. The city didn't change overnight. But for one man and one woman, it changed enough. It's been 2 years. The alley behind the diner is no longer a place for broken conversations and cold silence. It's now called Sterling Lane, marked with a bronze plaque that reads, For those who saw the invisible and chose kindness anyway. The diner is still open, still modest. But now, above the register, hangs a framed photo. Emily and Richard, smiling, shoulder to shoulder, holding 2 cups of diner coffee. Emily never quit her job. She still serves coffee, still greets regulars by name. But now, she runs something else, too. The Green Sterling Foundation, a nonprofit supporting young adults aging out of foster care and women leaving domestic abuse. Staffed mostly by people who've lived those realities themselves. It's not glamorous, but it's real. And that's exactly how she wanted it. As for Richard, he stepped down from his board roles quietly. He gave away most of his wealth anonymously. He bought a small cottage near a lake, and he writes. Not memoirs, but letters. To people who've helped him rediscover the parts of himself he thought were gone. To Emily. To his late wife. To strangers he'll never meet, hoping someone, someday, finds those words and feels seen. One afternoon, Emily visited him. No cameras, no announcement, just 2 cups of coffee and a smile. They sat on the porch, watching the water. You know, she said, I still don't understand why you pick me? He chuckled. Because you didn't pick me. You just saw me. That was enough. She looked at him. Tears welled up. Again, as they always did, quietly. I don't think I changed your life, she whispered. He gently shook his head. His voice was warm, not sentimental, but steady, almost fatherly. No, Emily. You reminded me I still had one, and reminded me of the kind of person I used to be. And that was the true legacy. Not the money. Not the buildings. Not the name. But a quiet girl with tired eyes and warm pancakes who chose kindness when no one else did. The world didn't notice. But he did. And that changed everything.